Chapter 3 of Oswald Bastable and Others. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Shrimpfish. Oswald Bastable and Others by E. Nesbit. The Arsenicators. A Tale of Crime. It was Mrs. Beale who put it into our heads that Miss Sandal lived plain because she was poor. We knew she thought high, because that is what you jolly well have to do if you are a vegetationist and an all-wooler and those sort of things. And we tried to get money for her, like we had once tried to do for ourselves, and we succeeded by means that have been told alone in another place in getting 2 golden pounds. Then, of course, we began to wonder what we had better do with the 2 pounds now we had got them.
"Put them in the savings bank,"
Dora said.
Alice said, "Why, when we could have them to look at?"
Noelle thought we ought to buy her something beautiful to adorn Miss Sandal's bare dwelling. Ajo thought we might spend it on nice tinned and potted things from the stores, to make the plain living and high thinking go down better. But Oswald knew that, however nice the presents are that other people buy for you, it is really more satisfying to have the chink to spend exactly as you like. Then Dickie said, "I don't believe in letting money lie idle. Father always says it's bad business."
"They give interest at the bank, don't they?"
Dora said. "Yes, 2pence a year or some rot like that. We ought to go into trade with it, and try to make more of it. That's what we ought to do."
"If it's Miss Sandal's money, do you think we ought to do anything with it without asking her?"
"It isn't hers till she's got it, and it is hers because it's not ours to spend. I think we're, in loco parentis to that 2 quid, because anyone could see poor Miss Sandal doesn't know how to manage her money, and it will be much better if we give her 10 pounds than just 2. This is how Dickie argued. We were sitting on the sands when this council took place, and Alice said,
"Suppose we bought a shrimping net and sold shrimps from our window in red handkerchiefs and white French caps."
But we asked her how she would like going into the sea nearly up to her neck in all weathers, and she had to own she had not thought of that. Besides, shrimps are so beastly cheap, more than you can eat for 2pence. The conversation was not interesting to anyone but Dickie, because we did not then believe we could do it, though later we thought differently, but I dare say we should have gone on with it just out of politeness to him, only at this moment we saw a coast guard, who is a great friend of ours, waving to us from the sea-wall. So we went up, and he said, "You take my tip and cut along home. There's something come for you." "Perhaps it's heaps of things, like I said, to eat with the plain living," said H.O., and bright visions of hampers full of the most superior tuck winged our young legs as we cut along home. It was not, however, a hamper that we found awaiting us. It was a large box, and besides that, there were 2 cases addressed to Dickie and me, and through the gaps in the boards we could see twisted straw, and our hearts leapt high in our breasts, because we knew that they were bikes. And such indeed they proved to be, free-wheels of the most unspotted character, the noble gift of our Indian uncle, ever amiable, generous, and esteemed. While we were getting the glorious bikes from their prison bars, the others were undoing the box which had their names on it. It contained cakes and sweets, a work-basket for Dora, lined with red satin, and dressed up with silver thimbles, and all sorts of bodkins and scissors, and knives with silver handles. There was a lovely box of paints for Alice. Noelle had a paint box too, and H.O. had a very good Aunt Sally, and there were lots of books. Not the sawdusty dry kind that Miss Sandal had in her house, but jolly good books, the kind you can't put down till you've finished. But just now we hardly looked at them, For who, with a spark of manly spirit, would think twice about a book with a new freewheel champing the oil like a charger in a ballad? Dickie and I had a 3-mile spin before dinner, and only fell off 5 times between us. 3 spills were Dickie's, 1 was Oswald's, and 1 was when we ran into each other. The bikes were totally uninjured. As time ran its appointed course, we got a bit used to the bikes, and, finding that you cannot ride all day and all night, we began to look at the books. Only one of them comes into this story. It was called The Youth's Manual of Scientific and Mechanical Recreation, and of course, we none of us read it till we'd read everything else. And then we found it wasn't half bad. It taught you how to make all sorts of things, galvanic batteries, and kites, and mousetraps, and how to electroplate things, and how to do wood carving and leather work. We tried as many of the things as we had money for, and some of them succeeded. Then we made a fire balloon. It took a long time to make, and then it caught fire and blazed away before we could get it launched. So we made another, and Noel dropped it near the water butt, where there was a puddle, and, being tissue paper, it was unable to stand the strain. So we made another, but the paste was bad, and it did not stick. So we made another. Then, at last, when all was ready, Oswald climbed onto the pigsty at Mrs. Beale's and held the balloon very steady while Dickie lighted the cotton wool, soaked in spirits of wine, which hangs from the end, where cars are in larger sizes, and causes it to be called a fire balloon. A taper is burned inside the balloon, and then, according to the book, it readily ascends and is carried away by the wind, sometimes to a considerable distance. Well, this time everything happened just as the book said, which is not always the case. It was a clear, dark night, bright stars only, and, to our relief and agreeable surprise, our balloon rose up and sailed away, dragging its lighted tail like a homemade comet. It sailed away over the marshes, getting smaller and smaller, and at last it was, though lost to sight, to memory dear. Some of us thought it wasn't worth doing, but Oswald was glad he had persevered. He does hate to be beaten. However, we none of us cared to make another, so we went to bed. Dickie always goes to sleep directly on these occasions, but Oswald, more thoughtful for his years, sometimes reviews the events of the day. He must have been nearly asleep, because he was just reviewing an elephant that flew with a lamp inside, so that it looked like a fire balloon, when Alice suddenly came and woke him up completely.
"Beware,"
she said in tones of awe, and he said, but not crossly, "Well, what on earth's up now?"
"The fire balloon,"
replied Alice. "What about it?" he rejoined, still calm and kind, though roused from his reviews.
"Why, it came to me all in a minute. Oh, Oswald, when it comes down, there are lots of farms in the marsh. Suppose it comes down and sets light to something. It's a crime, arsenic or something, and you can be hanged for it."
"Don't be an idiot," said Oswald kindly. "The book wouldn't have told youths how to make them if they were crimes. Go back to bed, for goodness sake."
"I wish we hadn't. Oh, I do,"
said Alice. But she did as she was told. Oswald has taught her this. Next day her fears had stopped, like silent watches in the night, and we began to make a trap for badgers, in case we ever found one. But Dickie went to the top of the mill with some field glasses he had borrowed from Mr. Carrington to look at distant ships with, and he burst into the busy circle of badger trap makers, and said, "I say, come and look! There's a fire in the marsh!"
"There!"
said Alice, dropping the wire pliers on her good elder brother's foot.
"What did I tell you?"
We all tore to the top of the mill, and, sure enough, far across the sunny green marshes rose a little cloud of smoke, and blue and yellow flames leaped out every now and then. We all took turns to look through the glasses. Then Oswald said, "This is no time for looking through field glasses with your mouths open. We must go and help. We might fetch the fire engines or something. The bikes, Dickie!" Almost instantly we were in the saddle and tearing along the level marsh towards the direction of the fire. At first, we got down at every crossroad and used the field glasses to see which way to go. But as we got nearer, or the fire got bigger, or perhaps both, we could see it quite plainly with the naked eye. It was much further off than we had thought, but we rode on, undaunted, regardless of fatigue and of dinner time, being now long gone by. We got to the fire at last. It was at Crown Ovender Farm, and we had to lift the bikes over fences and wheel them over plowed fields to get there, because we did not know the right way by road. Crown Ovender is a little farmhouse, and a barn opposite, and a great rickyard, and 2 of the ricks were alight. They smoked horribly, and the wind blew the hot smoke into your eyes, and every now and then you saw great flames, yards long they seemed, leap out as if they were crying to get to the house. We had put our bikes in a ditch a field away, and now we went all round about to ask if we could help, but there wasn't a soul to be seen. We did not know what to do. Even Oswald, always full of resource, almost scratched his head, which seems to help some people to think, though I don't think it ever would me, besides not looking nice. "I wish we'd told them in the village," said Dickie. We had not done this, and the reason, the author is ashamed to say, was because we wanted to get there before anyone else. This was very selfish, and the author has often regretted it. The flames were growing larger and fiercer, and the tar on the side of the barn next the rickyard was melting and running down like treacle. "There's a well," said Dickie suddenly. "It isn't a deep well, and there are 2 buckets." Oswald understood. He drew up the water, and Dickie took the buckets as they came up, full and dripping, and dashed the water onto the tarry face of the barn. It hissed and steamed. We think it did some good. We took it in turns to turn the well wheel. It was hard work, and it was frightfully hot. Then suddenly we heard a horrid sound, a sort of out-of-breath scream, and there was a woman, very red in the face and perspiring, climbing over the fence. "Hollo," said Oswald. "Oh," the woman said, panting. "It's not the house, then. Thank them as be, it's not the house. Oh, my heart alive, I thought it was the house." "It isn't the house," said Oswald, "but it jolly soon will be." "Oh, my poor Lily," said the woman. "With this air wind, the house'll be alight in a minute, and her a bed in there. Where's Honeyset?" "There's no one here but us. The house is locked up," we said. "Yes, I know, 'cause of tramps. Honeyset's got the key. I comes in as soon as I've cleared dinner away. She's ill abed, sleeping like a lamb, I'll be bound, all unknowing of her burning end." "We must get her out," said Oswald. But the woman didn't seem to know what to do. She kept on saying, "Where's Honeyset? Oh, drat him, where's that Honeyset?" So then Oswald felt it was the time to be a general, like he always meant to if he got the chance. He said, "Come on!" and he took a stone and broke the kitchen window, and put his hand through the jagged hole and unfastened the catch, and climbed in. The back door was locked and the key gone, but the front door was only bolted inside. But it stuck very tight, from having been painted and shut before the paint was dry, and never opened again. Oswald couldn't open it. He ran back to the kitchen window and shouted to the others. "Go round to the other door and shove for all you're worth," he cried in the manly tones that all must obey. So they went, but Dickie told me afterwards that the woman didn't shove for anything like all she was worth. In fact, she wouldn't shove at all till he had to make a sort of battering ram of her, and then she seemed to awake from a dream, and they got the door open. We followed the woman up the stairs and into a bedroom, and there was another woman, sitting up in bed, trembling, and her mouth opening and shutting.
"Oh, it's you, Eliza,"
she said, falling back against the pillows.
"I thought it were tramps."
Eliza did not break things to the sufferer gently, like we should have done, however hurried. "Mercy, you aren't burnt alive in your bed, Lily," she merely remarked. "The place is all ablaze." Then she rolled her sick sufferer in a blanket and took hold of her shoulders and told us to take her feet. But Oswald was too calm to do this suddenly. He said, "Where are you going to put her?" "Anywheres," said Eliza wildly. "Anywheres is better than this here." "There's plenty of time," said Oswald, and he and Dickie rushed into another room and got a feather bed and bedclothes and hunched them down the stairs and dragged them half a field away and made a bed in a nice dry ditch, and then we consented to carry the unfortunate bedwoman to it. The house was full of smoke by this time, though it hadn't yet caught fire, and I tell you we felt just like heroic firemen as we stumbled down the crookedy narrow stairs, back first, bearing the feet of the sick woman. Oswald did so wish he had a fireman's helmet to put on. When we got the fading Lily to her dry ditch, she clutched Oswald's arm and whispered, "Save the sticks." "What sticks?" asked Oswald, who thought it was the ragings of delirium. "She means the furniture," said Eliza, "but I'm afraid its doom is written on high." "Rubbish," said Oswald kindly, and we flew back, us boys dragging Eliza with us. There didn't seem to be much furniture in the house, but when we began to move it, it at once seemed to multiply itself with the rapidity of compound interest. We got all the clothes out first, in drawers and clothes baskets, and tied up in sheets. Eliza wasn't much use. The only thing she could do was to look for a bed key to unscrew the iron bedsteads, but Oswald and Dickie toiled on. They carried out chairs and tables and hearth rugs. As Oswald was staggering on under a Windsor armchair, with a tea-tray and an ironing board under his arms, he ran into a man. "What's up?" said he. "Fire!" said Oswald. "I seed that," said the man. Oswald shoved the chair and other things onto the man. "Then lend a hand to get the things away," he said. And more people came, and all worked hard, but Oswald and Dickie did most. Eliza never even found that bed key, because when she saw people beginning to come thicker and thicker across the fields, like ants hurrying home, she went out and told everyone over and over again that Honeysett had got the key. Then a woman came along, and Eliza got her into a corner by the stairs and jawed. I heard part of the jaw. "And poor Mrs. Simpkins, her man, he is gone to Ashford Market with his beasts and 3 other men, and me and my man said we'd have Liz up at my place, her being my sister, so as Honeysett could go off to Romney about the sheep, but she wouldn't come, not though we brought the light cart over for her, so we thought it best Honeysett stayed about this week, and go for the sheep tomorrow." "Then the house would have been all empty but for her not being wishful to go along of you?" Oswald heard the other say. "Yes," said Eliza, "and so you see—" "You keep your mouth shut," the other woman fiercely said. "You're Lily's sister, but Tom, he's my brother. If you don't shut your silly mouth, you'll be getting of them into trouble. It's insured, ain't it?" "I don't see," said Eliza. "You don't never see nothing," said the other. "You just don't say a word less you're arst, and then only as you come to look after her and found the fire a-ragin' something cruel." "But why?" The other woman clawed hold of her and dragged her away, whispering secretly. All this time the fire was raging, but there were lots of men now to work the well and the buckets, and the house and the barn had not caught. When we had got out all the furniture, some of the men set to work on the barn, and, of course, Oswald and Dickie, though weary, were in this also. They helped to get out all the wool, bundles and bundles of it, but when it had come to sacks of turnip seed and things, they thought they had had enough, and they went to where the things were that had come out of the larder, and they got a jug of milk and some bread and cheese, and took it to the woman who was lying in the dry ditch on the nice bed they had so kindly made for her. She drank some milk, and asked them to have some, and they did, with bread and cheese, Dutch, and jolly glad they were of it. Just as we had finished, we heard a shout, and there was the fire engine coming across the field. I do like fire engines. They are so smart and fierce and look like dragons ready to fight the devouring element. It was no use, however, in spite of the beautiful costumes of the firemen, because there was no water except in the well, and not much left of that. The man named Honeysett had ridden off on an old bone shaker of his to fetch the engines. He had left the key in the place where it was always kept, only Eliza had not had the sense to look for it. He had left a letter for her, too, written in red pencil on the back of a bill for a mowing machine. It said, "Rick's on fire. Going to get fire engines." Oswald treasures this letter still as a memento of happier days. When Honeysett saw the line of men handing up buckets to throw on the tarry wall, he said, "That ain't no manner of use. Wind's changed a hour agone." And so it had. The flames were now reaching out the other way, and 2 more ricks were on fire. But the tarry walls were quite cool and very wet, and the men who were throwing the water were very surprised to find that they were standing in a great puddle. And now, when everything in the house and the barn was safe, Oswald had time to draw his breath and think, and to remember with despair exactly who it was that had launched a devastating fire balloon over the peaceful marsh. It was getting dusk by this time, but even the splendor of all those burning ricks against the darkening sky was merely wormwood and gall to Oswald's upright heart, and he jolly soon saw that it was the same to Dickie's. "I feel pretty sick," he said. "Let's go home." "They say the whole 11 ricks are bound to go," said Dickie, "with the wind the way it is." "We're bound to go," said Oswald. "Where?" inquired the less thoughtful Dickie. "To prison," said his far-seeing brother, turning away and beginning to walk towards the bicycles. "We can't be sure it was our balloon," said Dickie, following. "Pretty average," said Oswald bitterly. "But no one would know it was us if we held our tongues." "We can't hold our tongues," Oswald said. "If we do, someone else will be blamed, as sure as fate. You didn't hear what that woman said about insurance money." "We might wait and see if anyone does get into trouble, and then come forward," said Dickie. And Oswald owned they might do that, but his heart was full of despair and remorse. Just as they got to their bikes, a man met them. "All lost, I suppose?" he said, jerking his thumb at the blazing farmyard. "Not at all," said Dickie. "We saved the furniture and the wool and things." The man looked at us and said heavily, "Very kind of you, but it was all insured." "Look here," said Oswald earnestly. "Don't you say that to anyone else." "Eh?" said the man. "If you do, they're safe to think you set fire to it yourself." He stared, then he frowned, then he laughed and said something about old heads on young shoulders, and went on. We went on too, in interior gloom, that only grew gloomier as we got nearer and nearer home. We held a council that night after the little ones had gone to bed. Dora and Alice seemed to have been crying most of the day. They felt a little better when they heard that no one had been burned to death. Alice told me she had been thinking all day of large families burned to little cinders. But about telling of the fire balloon we could not agree. Alice and Oswald thought we ought, but Dickie said, "Wait," and Dora said, "Write to Father about it." Alice said,
"No, it doesn't make any difference about our not being sure whether our balloon was the cause of destruction. I expect it was, and anyway, we ought to own up."
"I feel so too," said Oswald, "but I do wish I knew how long in prison you got for it." We went to bed without deciding anything. And very early in the morning Oswald woke, and he got up and looked out of the window, and there was a great cloud of smoke still going up from the doomed rickyard. So then he went and woke Alice and said, "Suppose the police have got that poor farmer locked up in a noisome cell, and all the time it's us."
"That's just what I feel,"
said Alice. Then Oswald said, "Get dressed." And when she came out into the road, where Oswald, pale but resolute, was already pacing with firm steps, and he said, "Look here, let's go and tell. Let's say you and I made the balloon. The others can stop out of it if they like."
"They won't if it's really prison,"
said Alice.
"But it would be noble of us to try it on. Let's—"
But we found we didn't know who to tell.
"It seems so fatal to tell the police,"
said Alice.
"There's no getting out of it afterwards. Besides, he's only Jameson, and he's very stupid."
The author assures you you do not know what it is like to have a crime like arsenic on your conscience, and to have gone to the trouble and expense of making up your mind to confess it, and then not to know who to. We passed a wretched day, and all the time the ricks were blazing. All the people in the village went over with carts and bikes to see the fire, like going to a fair or a show. In other circumstances we should have done the same, but now we had no heart for it. In the evening Oswald went for a walk by himself, and he found his footsteps turning towards the humble dwelling of the ancient mariner who had helped us in a smuggling adventure once. The author wishes to speak the truth, so he owns that perhaps Oswald had some idea that the ancient mariner, who knew so much about smugglers and highwaymen, might be able to think of some way for us to save ourselves from prison without getting an innocent person put into it. Oswald found the mariner smoking a black pipe by his cottage door. He winked at Oswald as usual. Then Oswald said, "I want to ask your advice, but it's a secret. I know you can keep secrets." When the aged one had agreed to this, Oswald told him all. It was a great relief. The mariner listened with deep attention, and when Oswald had quite done, he said, "It ain't the stone jug this time, mate. That there balloon of yours, I see it go up. Fine and pretty 'twas, too." "We all saw it go up," said Oswald in despairing accents. "The question is, where did it come down?" "At Burmarsh, sonny," was the unexpected and unspeakably relieving reply. "My sister's husband's niece. It come down and lodged in their pear tree. Showed it me this morning, with the red ink on it, what spelled your names out." Oswald, only pausing to wring the hand of his preserver, tore home on the wings of the wind to tell the others. I don't think we were ever so glad of anything in our lives. It is a frightfully blighting thing when you believe yourself to be an arsenicator, or whatever it is, of the deepest dye. As soon as we could think of anything but our own cleanness from guilt, we began to fear the worst of Tom Simpkins, the farmer at Crown Ovenden. But he came out of it, like us, without a stain on his fair name, because he and his sister and his man Honeyset all swore that he had given a tramp leave to sleep up against the beanstalk the night before the fire, and the tramp's pipe and matches were found there. So he got his insurance money, but the tramp escaped. But when we told father all about it, he said he wished he had been a director of that fire insurance company. We never made another fire balloon, though it was not us that time, it might have been, and we know now but too well the anxieties of a life of crime. End of Chapter 3.